The 16th of August is the season opening for Roebucks here in Sweden. And I have put together this little video to share my best 9 tips to get success during the Roebuck hunt. The first tip, number 1, is to know what kind of roebucks you have in your area. I use trail cameras, and I also go out in the area during summertime to spot for raw deer. In that way I know where to hunt and hopefully get some success on some of the first days of the Roebuck hunt. Tip number 2 comes to the rifle setup I use. I use my ordinary rifle for stalking, but especially for the Roebuck hunt, I use a rifle scope with a large front lens. So I can hunt very early mornings and very late evenings. In this case I use my 2.5 to 10 times 56. So I don't need to stop hunting until the law says we can't hunt anymore here in Sweden. Tip number 3, it comes to shooting rest. I really like to give it a try to call some roebucks because we are in the end of the rut season when we have the season opening, and it's really nice to call the bucks. And since I call them, they hopefully come running towards me. So I gain their attention, and in that way it's extra important to be able to stand still on your stand and do not move, because I think movement is the worst enemy to scare the roebucks away. So I use my tripod like this. When I came to the stand, I put the tripod up. I put the rifle like this on my shoulder. And in this way, I can stand very long time. And when I call, I can take up my binoculars like this and glance for roebucks and study them in a far distance or when they come closer with a minimal of movement. And I don't need to raise and lower my rifle to be able to use my binoculars. And also when the roebucks are coming very close or maybe also surprise me from a strange angle, I am pretty ready to shoot even from this position, because sooner or later the roebuck will pass some trees or some bushes or something. Then I can, with a minimum of movement, do like this and also change direction completely. And this is a very important thing for me to bring to Roebuck hunt, a tripod shooting rest. Then we have tip number 4. It comes to camouflage. Since I'm dragging the attention towards me when I'm calling roebuck, I want to have some kind of camouflage pattern suitable for the terrain I'm hunting. Preferable, I like to use like the leaf camouflage, because this also breaks up my contours. And I think that the roebucks have a really hard time seeing me as long as that I'm sitting or standing pretty still. I want to cover my hands, because the hands is the part I need to move to go from like the binoculars to the rifle and the game call. So it's important to cover the hands. Unfortunately, I many times forget the gloves at home, but normally I bring them. Also, a face mask is very good. In the situations where I need to stand out in the sun, for example, I can bring up the face mask to cover a little of my bright face. Then we have tip number 5, and that also is a tip that is concerning movement and comfort. It's mosquito repellent. It's very hard to stand still if the mosquitoes are chewing at you all the time. So I always use some kind of repellent to be able to be a little more comfortable out in the hunting grounds. Tip number 6, it comes to my binoculars. I always bring some kind of binoculars when hunting roebuck, either to spot roebuck in long distances over open fields, or when I'm hunting inside a forest. I think the binoculars make it easier for me to focus on different points inside the branches and stuff like that, to see if there is anything at all, or also judge the horns of a roebuck coming towards me, and so on. And since I'm hunting early mornings and late evenings, I prefer a binocular with a pretty large lens, In this case I have a 8x56. I also use a pretty long strap so I can carry my binoculars on the side of my body, because if I need to crawl I can put it up on my back like this and I can still crawl on the ground, and I get it out of my way, but the strap is still long enough so I can use it. That is a very important thing for me. Tip number 7, it comes to be aware of the place I'm hunting in, so I come in the right wind and using the sun and shadows in a correct way. When it comes to the wind, I use some kind of wind indicator. In this way I can see how the wind is blowing, and I try to avoid to put my scent track into the area where I think the roebuck is, or into the area where I think the roebuck will come when I call him. I also try to use the shadows, stay out of the bright sunlight, so when I sneak or stalk in the terrain to come to the position where I shall do the call from, I try to stay in the shadows and take a position under some kind of branches and so on when I take my stand calling the roebuck. They have a much harder time seeing me, and if I'm lazy forgetting my gloves and so on, it's a little less important if I'm inside the shadows in that way. When it comes to tip number 8, it's regarding my game calls and why I use some specific game call. I use open membrane game call hunting roebuck. This is mainly of 2 reasons. One, I can call and put all the efforts from my lungs into the membrane and get the sound far away out and reach the buck very, very far out. But it also, a membrane call allows me to have the call in my mouth and still aiming at the roebuck and calling when the roebuck's coming very close. Game calls where you use your hands to make the sounds make that one impossible. So, and with this kind of open membrane call I can use all different sounds I need to call roebucks. Tip number 9, it is regarding fox. Now in the early season there is a lot of fox pups out, and I always try to prioritize shooting a fox before a roebuck. The roebuck is still in the area, but if you have a normal population of fox in your area, try to prioritize shooting the fox instead. They are harder to come by later on. And it also helps the roe deer population to grow, since the fox they have a pretty large outtake from the roe deers. For that I also bring a little game call in some way to especially attract fox pups, like with a mice squeak or something like that. Because sometimes you see the pups far out, and instead of stalking them I try to lure them in closer. This is my 9 best tips for you guys to be successful on your hunts. I don't say that this is the best tips, it's just from experience from the way I am hunting. And if you want to see more of this, I have recently put up 4 new roebuck videos here on YouTube. They are produced some years ago for DVD and some paid per-view streaming service on the internet. But I've now decided to put up those ones for you guys. Especially I want to emphasize on you, maybe take a look on a film that name is The Hunt for Big Bucks with game calls, where we hunt here in Sweden, England, Scotland, and we shoot some pretty big bucks actually. And it's my first video ever, made back in 2012. And I really hope you will enjoy that one. Do not hesitate to give us a thumbs up or a little comment if there is something you wonder about the roebuck hunt, and I shall try to answer it in the best way I can. Otherwise, I hope every one of you have some gain out of these small tips.